Kelsey is going to read, who's first? So you'll have to, yes, Bathsheba's first. So we're going to have it read in Spanish or a different language, and then Kelsey's going to read it for us in English here.
Si hablo en lenguas humanas y angelicales, pero no tengo amor, no soy más que un metal que resuena o un platillo que hace ruido. Si tengo el don de profecía y entiendo todos los misterios, si poseo todo conocimiento, si tengo una fe que logra trasladar montañas, pero me falta el amor, no soy nada. Si reparto entre los pobres todo lo que poseo, si entrego mi cuerpo para tener de qué presumir, pero no tengo amor, nada gano con eso.
If I speak in tongues of humans and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing.
El amor es paciente, es bondadoso, no tiene envidia, no se jacta, no es orgulloso, no deshonra a los demás, no busca su propio beneficio, no se enoja fácilmente, no guarda rencor. El amor no se deleita de la maldad, sino que se regocija con la verdad. Siempre protege, siempre confía, siempre espera, siempre persevera.
Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things.
We're going to sing this together. Love in any language, straight from the heart, pulls us all together, never apart. And once we learn to speak it, all the world will hear. Love in any language, fluently spoken here.
Die Liebe hört niemals auf. Prophezeiungen werden allerdings ein Ende nehmen. Zungen werden aufhören. Wissen wird ein Ende nehmen. Denn wir wissen nur im Teil und wir prophezeien nur im Teil. Aber wenn das Vollkommene kommt, wird das teilweise ein Ende nehmen.
Love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end.
Cuando era niña hablaba como niño, pensaba como niño, razonaba como niño. Al llegar a ser hombre, dejé atrás las costumbres de la infancia, porque ahora solo vemos un reflejo como en un reflejo. Entonces veremos cara a cara. Ahora conozco en parte, entonces conoceré plenamente como soy plenamente conocido.
When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have fully known, as I have been fully known.
Emmanuel's.
We're going to sing first. Love in any language, straight from the heart, pulls us all together, never apart. And once we learn to speak it, all the world will hear. Love in any language, fluently spoken here.
Et maintenant, ces trois choses demeurent, la foi, l'espérance et l'amour. Mais le plus grand d'entre elles, c'est l'amour.
And now faith, hope, and love remain. These three, and the greatest of these is love.
Love in any language, straight from the heart, pulls us all together, never apart. And once we learn to speak it, all the world will hear. Love in any language, fluently spoken here. Anybody recognize that song? That's an old one, about 1990, I think. Yeah, it was one of my favorites back in the day. I want to use two stories today, and I'll just kind of tell you briefly the two because I want to talk about both of them a little bit because they belong together. At the day of Pentecost, we usually read the story of, in Acts 2, the story of all the people, the diaspora of the Jews that were coming together for the celebration of Pentecost. And they gathered in one place, and they had this strange experience, but I think it was also kind of a dream, that they were all speaking in their tongue, but hearing in their own language others speaking. So that it was like they were understanding everyone. Everybody was coming together and understanding as they spoke in their own tongue. That is the second part of a story in the Bible that started in Genesis. The book of Genesis, in the 11th chapter, is the story of the Tower of Babel. And if you remember that story, the people had all gotten together and they were going to build a great big tower. You know, almost like they were trying to reach God, right? And God got a little afraid of what was happening, a little disturbed by what was happening. And so God decided to scatter these people by giving each of them new languages. And so they had so many languages that they couldn't understand each other. Therefore, they couldn't build the tower, and they were totally not able to do that. The tower went down, so to speak. Now, before I go any further, I want to just mention, in the ancient Near East, if you think of a tower, what tower do you think of? You have Tower of Babylon, yes, which is that tower in that story, but there's, in Egypt particularly, the pyramids, right, are one of the biggest towers, right? How were they built? Who built them? Slaves built them. And those slaves, if it's my understanding, were their language was taken away from them, so they could not revolt, and they were made to learn the one language, the Egyptian language. So one of the ways you might see the Tower of Babel is God was frustrated that people were being used, and their languages were being taken away, right? And so by the oppressor. And so that was one way in which God kind of gave liberty back to the people who were enslaved and brought down the oppressor. That's one way to look at it. So enough of that. I'll go into my sermon now. You'll wrestle with those two stories. So I have a confession to make to you. I've never really mastered a second language, and it's one of the things that really has frustrated me about myself. My kids all took German or Spanish in middle school or high school. I'm not sure they even offered it in my schools, and if they did, I must not have been interested. It was only later in life, while I was in seminary in Dallas, Texas, at SMU campus, Perkins School of Theology, that I started to get interested in languages. I was volunteering at a West Dallas community center. It was a low-income area. And the kids and the adults I was working with all had Spanish as their original language, their first language. And one of my seminary mates, Alex, started taking extensive Spanish lessons as he prepared. He was going to do a 9-month internship in this bilingual situation in West Dallas. And I don't know if maybe I was jealous, I think I probably was, or just interested, but Cindy and I started taking beginning Spanish classes in seminary. And I thought I was doing surprisingly well, you know, I really did. I mean, even Cindy said I was catching on pretty good. And so one day, I was at a potluck at the Wesley Rankin Center in West Dallas, and I thought I'd try my hand using this language for the first time, using a little Spanish. We were having dinner, we were sitting in tables of 8, and there were some refried beans on the table. So I said, or I thought I said in Spanish, "Please pass the beans." And everybody kind of stopped what they were doing. That should have been a clue to me, and looked at me kind of strangely, and then they went on with their conversation. Nobody passed me the beans. And I thought maybe they didn't hear me like a dummy, right? And so I said it even louder, "Please pass the beans," in Spanish. Again, they stopped, almost stunned this time. And they looked at me strangely and went on, tried to ignore me. Nobody passed me the beans. But I was not smart. I was stupid. I should have figured out the problem was me, but I didn't. I said it one more time, this time for everybody to hear, "Please pass the beans." And the whole room went silent. And a little girl came up to her mother and said in English, "Mommy, why does that Mr. Brooke keep calling us all homosexuals?" I thought, what? My face went red, and I said, "No, no, no," in English, "Please pass the beans." And the place erupted in laughter. It is not easy, is it, to understand each other as human beings? Even when we share the same language, can I be right? We struggle. Remember years ago when the book Men from Mars and Women from Venus came out? I mean, I was so excited. Finally, I can understand Cindy, right? And Cindy can finally understand me. I got the book and I made us read it together. The problem isn't me, it's the fact that we men and we women come from 2 different planets, I kept saying. I just need to learn their language and she needs to learn mine. And we both read the book, and we finished. When we finished, Cindy asked, "So what do you really think?" And then she said, "You know what I think? I think we both come from the wrong planets, evidently. You seem like you're more in tune with Venus, and I think I'm more in tune with Mars. This book is trying to simplify things way too much." It doesn't matter if we all speak the same language, we still struggle to understand each other. Israelites and Palestinians, Democrats and Republicans, United Methodists and Global Methodists, West Coast folk and Midwesterners, 64-year-olds and 14-year-olds. Emerson's 8, and she now has decided to call me old man all the time. Those who have an INFP Myers-Briggs, any of those out there? And those who have an ESTJ Myers-Briggs classification. We're just so blasted different. And it seems like sometimes we're becoming increasingly fractured, distant, even worse at communicating. And it's just so frustrating, isn't it? To read the news and hear all that misunderstanding. That's exactly the way folks in the first century of Israel felt, by the way. The people of Israel had for centuries been dispersed and scattered all over the world by oppressors, kicked out of their homeland by war and economic threats and community conflicts and more. And on the day of Pentecost, many of them would travel from great distances to gather at the temple again. This was kind of an annual thing to try to make your way back to the temple, to come together under one roof. But when they did, they all now spoke different languages. They couldn't find common ground. How frustrating that must have been. As you know, I've been reading a beautiful book by botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer. And in the chapter called Learning of the Grammar of Animacy, she shares this story, and I'd like to share it, about trying to learn the language of her people, her original people of her language. Had history been different, she writes, I would likely speak Badawamimin or Potawatomi, an Anishinaabe language. But like many of the 350 indigenous languages of the Americas, Potawatomi is threatened. And I speak the language you read, English. The powers of assimilation did their work as my chance of hearing that language, and yours too, was washed from the mouths of Indian children in government boarding schools, where speaking your native tongue was forbidden. Many of them were Christian schools. Children like my grandfather, who was taken from his family when he was just a little boy of 9 years old. This history scattered not only our words, but also our people. Today, I live far from our reservation, so even if I could speak the language, I can't find anybody to speak it with. But a few summers ago, at our yearly tribal gathering, a language class was held, and I slipped into the tent to listen. There was a deal of excitement about the class because for the first time, every single fluent speaker in our tribe would be there as a teacher. Every single fluent speaker. When the speakers were called forward to the circle of folding chairs, they moved slowly with canes, walkers, wheelchairs, only a few entirely under their own power. I counted them as they filled the chairs. 9. 9 fluent speakers in the entire world. 9. Our language, millennia in their making, sits in those 9 chairs. The words that praise creation, told the old stories, lulled my ancestors to sleep, rest today in the tongues of 9 very mortal men and women. Each in turn addresses the small group of would-be students. A man with long gray braids tells us how his mother hid him away when the Indian agents came to take the children. He escaped boarding school by hiding under an overhung bank where the sounds of the stream covered his crying. The others were all taken and had their mouths washed out with soap, or worse, for talking that dirty Indian language, quote, because he alone stayed home and was raised up, calling the plants and animals by the name Creator gave them. He is here today, a carrier of the language. The engines of assimilation worked well. The speaker's eyes blaze as he tells us, we're at the end of the road. We are all that is left. If you young people do not learn, the language will die. The missionaries in the United States government will have their victory at last. A great-grandmother from the circle pushes her walker up close to the microphone. It's not just the words that will be lost, she says. The language is the heart of our culture. It holds our thoughts, our way of seeing the world. It is too beautiful for English to explain. The story of the Tower of Babel continues in our day, too. People divided, misunderstood, and nearly eliminated due to misunderstanding and misuse of power. But the early Christians, both Jews and Gentiles, had a very different vision of the world here in this story in Acts, the Acts community. They had experienced a new sense of loving kindness found in the life, death, and resurrection of a man named Jesus from Galilee. And through this encounter, And by learning to live in the way of loving kindness, they had experienced a new way to view language. Through the power and spirit of this way of loving kindness, each was able to hear and experience in their own language. The solution to human understanding each other wasn't somehow forcing everyone to speak one language, basically what the West tried to do, but it was instead about learning a new way of living, the way of loving kindness we expressed in Jesus. It was this loving kindness that would bring folks together. The way of loving kindness wasn't about one language being spoken, but every single language being spoken and honored and respected with the spirit of loving kindness. The story of Pentecost in the second chapter of Acts isn't a story about something that happened factually, not just that. It's very metaphorical language. It was and is a metaphorical story meant to tell us about the fire and dream and spirit of a people who saw something incredibly new happening in their midst. And as they lived out the tenets of this new way of loving kindness, of this more excellent way, they experienced these proud divisions ending. Walls were coming down and new relationships were being formed. Paul writes about it. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor there is male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. The goal then is more of a visionary ideal, that we as the people of loving kindness try not to make everyone speak the same language, but instead that we all become allies, translators, so that we can realize the glorious diversity in each of these different languages and learn through loving kindness to understand ourselves and to help others understand as well. The goal, if I could say it, is not to be Lucy in the Great Peanuts cartoon. If you remember Lucy and Linus. Well, Lucy's in this one particular comic strip is very excited because she has just converted a couple of people to Christianity in her school. And Linus says, "Wow, that's amazing. How did you do it?" And she said, "Well, I kind of tried to explain it, but they didn't seem to be getting it. So I took my lunch pail and I hit them over the head." And now they're Christian. That is not the loving kindness way. The goal instead is to learn to be translators, bridge builders. Not so everyone can be Christians, but instead so that everyone can find the way of loving kindness in their own language, so they can find it in their own traditions and their faith heritages, and we can begin to work together. One step towards that is to try to learn another language ourselves. So not only so we can help translate for others, but also so we can understand that each language has a worldview and expression that is indeed different than ours. Different, but not inferior. That each language is a gift. A window in which we can see creation a new way, and by seeing a new way of looking at creation and our relationship to it, we also see a new way to see our God. When I was in Korea, I tried to learn Korean, and I got some going, but once you get to a country, you begin to realize how terrible you are at that language. And so I started to chicken out on using it. Right? But there was one day I was in a grocery store, and it just felt like so distant from these people that I was trying to get through in my English about, that I decided to try just to say hello in Korean. And I said hello, and then I said, "Do you speak English?" in Korean. And you would not believe the difference in tone that happened and changed in our relationship. It was totally different. I don't even know if I had it even close to right, but they appreciated that I tried, that I was at least trying. And what frustrates me the most sometimes is sometimes we don't even try. I think we can. And when we do, we form new relationships. And those new relationships have at the very heart of that relationship loving kindness, Christ. That, in my opinion, is what Pentecost is all about. And all the people said, amen.